Like the Finance Podcast. How are you today?
Great, and thank you for having me here.
Let's kick things off. You know, Tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll lead that into DataVisor and what DataVisor is all about. But let's first start with your background.
Sure. So I'm Yinglian Xie. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DataVisor. DataVisor is an end-to-end fraud and risk platform that is supporting large organizations to combat a variety of different kind of fraud and financial crimes. In terms of my background, I'm technology background. So I got my PhD of computer science from Carnegie Mellon University, and then spent about 7 to 8 years in research and work at Microsoft Research and partnering with various teams on combating a lot of different kind of large-scale attacks and fraud. So my specialty is really the intersection of parallel computing, machine learning, big data analysis, and cybersecurity and fraud.
And what made you want to start DataVisor? I always say, what was the aha moment that's like, I'm doing this, I'm going to start this company? When was that moment? And then we'll lead into talking about DataVisor from there.
Yeah, so prior to DataVisor, I've already spent over 10 years in the cybersecurity and fraud area, having looking at defending against all kinds of different, like various malicious attacks and fraud attacks. It's really kind of during Microsoft Research kind of days where I collaborated with different kind of teams to combat variety different kind of fraud, sometimes related with, for example, the account level, like a payment security that we see in the payment fraud, and sometimes with the advertisement infrastructure, and sometimes with the spam infrastructure and DDoS and the live security. So when we are looking at these different kind of services, it seems like everybody's fraud, everybody's attack is unique, very different. But when during my kind of work with them, actually there are a lot of commonality and how attacks behave, and there's always an underground kind of dark ecosystem. And today we are always facing these coordinated fraud rings, and we're always kind of seeing these fraud targeting these accounts, and whether those are consumer accounts that like we have every day with so many different apps, or it's kind of business accounts, and the business use a lot of service, a lot of apps in the opening account. So these accounts being targeted over and over, and it's just the format is slightly different, and because the product function is different, the product nature is different. So that made me think that, instead of developing these unique solutions to tackle this one-off attacks and project-based approach, why don't we take a step back? Why don't we look at the commonalities across this and to build something that's a lot more common and general that can help everybody to tackle these type of coordinated fraud, targeting all of these, whether it's a consumer business accounts in different ways, that would generate much more impact, in my view, would benefit all of us, not just combating the attacks we've been seeing, but future attacks, new attacks, and all the evolving attacks we didn't imagine, and to protect those products we didn't even have yet. So that was kind of the, like you said, the moment that really made me and my co-founder, we decided we want to build DataVisor, which is a company dedicated to obviously keep innovating and developing the best technology. But our goal is to be a lot more general platform to support different services and different players.
It's interesting. I recently interviewed the CEO of HackerOne, that does kind of the ethical hacking, and we were talking about how much AI helps, right, in being able to identify attacks even before they happen. But then we also started going down a rabbit hole of how it also helps the fraudsters, the hackers, even more so now than it ever did before. So, kind of as we look into, we're heading into 2025 now. What do you think the space that you operate in? How do you see that evolving in 2025? Like, what's top of mind for you?
Yes, you're very much to the point. If you look at the cybersecurity fraud area, it has its uniqueness because we are dealing with that people who have equal access to technology. And it's not a static game that we're trying to gain advance. And it's more dynamic, meaning that everything we improve, you got the dark side who are actually constantly evolving. So that made the problem a lot more challenging. And on top of all the things we want to do with the AI, this is one not just AI, but you got human elements into it and leveraging the technology. So not surprisingly, when we have the ChatGPT and Gen AI come out, and you started seeing them being leveraged with deeper fake, right? Synthesized voice and synthesized videos, and make up these IDs that look really, really kind of real and break into all kinds of services and having ways to generate, and even generate a plot of the new schemes that look so real to every one of us. So I think 2025, I'm looking at it, it's going to be continue. You will see fraudsters evolving. And from my perspective, I see three big trends. Number one is you see fraudsters actually are changing tactics really, really fast. That's in comparison with 10 years ago when we started working on this. Again, because of technology availability, the ability for them to adjust to new ideas and new technologies is really, you're seeing it on the orders, sometimes of hours, and not even kind of a months we're talking about, not even days. And the reason is that we've seen that the folks kind of all services launching a new product, a new feature, instantly that same day got hacked and got broke into, and with their vulnerability being identified by the attackers to launch large-scale attacks. And so if you look at the Chase TikTok kind of, right, the fraud literally is within one day, these kind of information that being leveraged, and not to mention for these attackers who are much more sophisticated. And number two is we are also seeing attackers are getting very much, we talk about, it's almost always large-scale coordinated. You hardly get somebody's outliers, and in today's world, and these seemingly kind of different kind of fraud, in the back, there's a lot of commonality. There are neural networks, and there's infrastructure, and there's somebody who targeted of stealing information, and there's somebody targeted of logging to these accounts to verify they work, and then they resell these information to some third party. Again, it's another level of kind of a different ecosystem kind of in the dark side of world of truly launching attacks. So it's an industry already there, and the scale is massive. So we've seen large scale attacks across the board. And obviously, the third trend we're seeing also the level of sophistication increase. And not to mention, we talk about deepfake already. We're also seeing attackers, they actually compile victim profiles. They study our profiles. They gather information about the profiles, and they categorize us into different profiles. And then when they launch these fraud campaigns, they actually will target specific profile demographics of certain victims to launch fraud, specifically targeting to us. And for example, I give you examples, and we've seen kind of a fraud campaigns could be targeting, trick somebody to do the authorized push payment scam for electronic goods, and versus another one and trick somebody to buy different gift card. We're seeing the victim profiles can be entirely different, but they look very, very similar within each fraud ring. And that's kind of something we're seeing. We expect to see the same thing continue going on, obviously, in 2025.
What are you seeing in terms of banks and credit unions as it comes to fraud?
Well, I do think everybody is talking about this topic. That's number one. This is no longer something we just basically, nobody can say I'm immune to this attacks. And on the other hand, from the banking industry, there are a few directions we're going into, like real-time payments. Everybody demand faster, instant payments. And we want the different kind of products. We see buy now, pay later, pay by bank, right? So with these new functions, features launched, it just makes a problem worse because many of these we don't have as much experience. And we don't know what vulnerability can exist, what kind of new fraud schemes can come from these fraudsters. And more importantly, and we talk about a lot of AI machine learning, we don't have even as much data points to get us to say, hey, with the data, with the machine learning, I got the good data set that I could train on to protect us. So everything to us is also new. And on the other hand, you see the fraudsters, the attackers evolve very fast. So I would say for banks and CEOs, I definitely see a lot of initiative of thinking about how do I be a little bit more proactive and get the infrastructure in place. And I think we've been talking to people, the number one inhibitor of adopting real-time payment, for example, for banks and credit unions, is whether they have the ability to do real-time fraud detection in place.
So you obviously, across the fintech and banking worlds, you've seen your fair share of what fraud looks like and how it continues to evolve. Where do you see the most common mistakes happen on the end of like the fintechs and the banks? Like what are they doing? Where do they tend to trip up the most?
I would say it's still that whether we do have that mindset, proactive mindset. We talk about for a lot of folks, they started realizing they need to have the mindset, they need to be proactive. But still, for many folks and for many of the new fintechs, and they get into the area, they don't really understand the how fraud attacks, how brutal that can be. And the feeling is I want to grow the business and let's launch the business first. And then if we started seeing attacks, let's react after that. We still seeing the mindset. I wouldn't say that's kind of still uncommon. That's still fairly common among a lot of players is this is afterthoughts. This is something when they launch. And therefore you see that basically the gap between product design and development versus that the fraud capability, many times we advocate that this should be a unified process. Whenever you design product, you should think about whether your product itself have a lot of design built in to not to be abused, not to be leveraged by the fraudsters. So sometimes we see still very common, this is afterthought, the product side have no idea, notion. They want to let everybody to come in and they design features that is really nice to the good users, but at the same time, so easy for the fraudsters to leverage as well.
Let's talk a little bit about advice you have for people that want to maybe break into this space as well. Not necessarily creating their own business in the space, right? But let's talk about why this is such a rewarding space to build in, and kind of two parts. So advice you'd give to people that are looking to kind of just start out their career in the fraud space, specifically really on the fintech side of things. And then part two is, what do you like most about what you're doing every day?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for a long time, so definitely would love to share some of my thoughts with folks in general for all of us looking at fraud like a space, and some of the general advice I would say is really kind of understand the fraud industry, how it works. And to us, same thing, like we have to understand how fraudsters work, how attackers work. And so this is not just academic exercise, even though I've been in the research part, but the biggest mistake we've seen, we treat this as any other scientific problem we want to solve. This is not just scientific problem. We really have to, and this is a practical problem we are solving. We have to understand how fraudsters work. This is kind of related with the security mindset. So, and treating it as a math exercise or pure data-driven approach, and sometimes can have its caveats, even though we like machine learning, but that aspects need to be combined with understanding how attackers work. So that's in general kind of my feeling. And for anybody who looking to get into the fraud area, and I always encourage to put the both side into it. Put the technology part into it, put the essentially our data science and our analytical skill on the other side. We have to understand how fraudsters truly work. And for me, I love this kind of industry because it's very fulfilling as it carries the mission of protecting every one of us. And so when you get to see the impact you're making these larger services in the world that we're benefiting from, right? Personally, me as one of the users using many of the services, and when I feel kind of DataVisor and all these fraud technology we are developing is protecting many of these large services and protecting the end users like you and me, I feel it's a very rewarding process and very fascinating kind of part to make the world better. So at the same time, there's a lot of also technology, a lot of innovation that needs to come into it. And for somebody who's also in the past with a little bit research background, I love that to keep kind of innovating, come up with a new technology, bring the best part, and to help us harden that part. It's again as a very satisfying process.
Now, one of the things I wanted to bring up before we wrap up here is my favorite thing to talk about people on the podcast now is basically what AI is doing to like tremendously impact different areas, right? Because it really changed the game across a wide range of products and platforms. So specifically with what you're building, how has AI truly impacted how you think about scaling the business, how you think about creating new products? Like, what is AI's involvement in kind of your decision making in all these different areas?
Oh yes, AI definitely played a very significant role. And if you got DataVisor from a very much day one, we are basically the avid early kind of adopters of AI technology, machine learning, and try to weave into our technology product from the very, very beginning. And when we think about AI, I'd like to actually broaden our mindset in many areas, particularly because this is a cybersecurity area that's a unique. You get both the technology piece and you get the human piece. So we want to also think a little bit out box on the AI technology side. So when we get started, we typically are seeing the traditional type of machine learning when we just started DataVisor. And that's where for DataVisor, we wanted to look at, can we do even better beyond that? Because that's where we know everybody's been using it. The biggest problem is that with the traditional machine learning model, it's data-driven approach, meaning you, based on what you observe, what you're seeing, come with tactics, come with models to address that. So the biggest problem is that we're facing with new attacks all the time. And the biggest challenge is how do we detect new unknown fraud? How do we be more proactive with technology? That's where we actually leverage a new type of machine learning called unsupervised machine learning. And unsupervised machine learning is a type of technology that's specifically designed to detect new and evolving fraud attacks without any historical knowledge or without any loss experience. We don't have to have the pain to detect new attacks. So I would say unsupervised machine learning plays a significant role in terms of capturing these coordinated new fraud rings, regardless how they evolve over time. So this is a unique kind of aspect that we're very proud of. The second aspect is with generative AI coming up, we are also very excited. And the question is how the generative AI can also help us, while attackers are leveraging that. So there are many areas we feel that we still trying to figure out the generative AI's capability in detection quality. But the one thing stood out from very beginning that it can work very well is to add the degree of automation and efficiency to our fraud detection work. And they give you examples that despite the machine learning detection, whether we use a traditional machine learning or unsupervised machine learning, we have tasks that we still need to do to determine, hey, what features needs to go in, how we want to basically model our data, right? How we want to also design our review process. There's also governance process. There's a review process. There's a rigorous kind of a lot of governance process to document what we do for the explainability and to, for example, customers, to the regulators. That's where we find generative AI actually plays a significant role to automate the task and also can help translate human insights into either these kind of features or maybe rule strategies in a far more automated way. And for tedious, the time-consuming human effort to tune these models and the strategies, that's where also generative AI plays a significant role. So you can see AI really can weave into different areas. I just think we just need to have an open mind, not to definitely just say, hey, there's only one way we want to apply AI, but keep a broad mind that how that could impact the workflow and the strategies we do across the all around area to make fraud detection better.
I love it. I really enjoyed our conversation here today. Thanks for teaching our audience more about kind of what's happening today, where you see things continuing to go from here, and for telling us a little bit about your story as well. Look forward to future conversations, and thanks so much.
Thank you so much, and thanks a lot for having me.